This show can be watched on a variety of platforms, but for the sake of brevity, I believe Crunchyroll would be my choice of platform due to its accessibility and notoriety. The show is 12 episodes long and was part of the 2019 winter season. Each episode runs for approximately 22 minutes, and it was animated by Cloverworks while being licensed by Aniplex. Simply put, Promised Neverland is a psychological horror thriller anime. When it came onto the scene in the winter of 2019, it was a massive topic of discussion within the anime community for its eerie and unique plot. The story follows a group of children who live on the Grace Fieldhouse, an orphanage surrounded by forest and a gate. These children are led and taken care of by their mama, Isabella, who often has these children take tests in order to sharpen their mental abilities. The show highlights three children, Emma, Ray, and Norman, the top three scorers on these tests. They have been told by Isabella to never wander too far from the orphanage, and as such, the children have often abided by the request. On the very first episode, one of the children, Connie, was announced to have been adopted. As she left the orphanage to meet her new parents, Emma and Norman noticed that she left her bunny doll behind that she always held. In an effort to try and return it to Connie, they encounter her dead body and soon find out that she was going to be eaten, and that the Grace Fieldhouse was really just a farm for breeding humans to be slaughtered and eaten by what the children dub demons. Upon learning about this gruesome fact, Emma and Norman talk about it to Ray, and they determine that they must create an escape plan in order to save their lives. But throughout the show, as time goes on, more variables must be taken account while planning their escape, and Mama starts to get more suspicious of the shifting variables around her and begins to suspect a possible escape by the children. The end result is a game of psychological chess, where the children have to work against the clock to escape before they are shipped out to their deaths, while Isabella has to play defense and stall out the clock, eventually delaying their escape until the lead planners, Ray, Emma, and Norman, are shipped out to their deaths. Now, in my opinion, and hear me out on this one, the anime really is not that good. Does that mean the whole series as an anime and manga are bad? No, not necessarily, and I'll get to that in a second, my thoughts on the season 2 of this show releasing next year. However, simply put, the characters in this show are just unlikable, and the storytelling and methods used to convey the plot and story forward are disappointing and lackluster. Towards the middle of the show, when the supposed tension starts to build and rise, when the real planning for the escape and Mama's intervention begin, it doesn't really feel like there's anything for the viewer to be able to emphasize or really be able to latch on with because of the amount of psychological chess the characters play with each other and with the viewer. There are so many double agents and triple agents in this show that at some point it just melts your brain down into soup. At the beginning of the escape planning, there was a suggestion that perhaps there was a mole within the escape team. Fingers and blame kept getting pointed at different people, and the show often found it difficult to settle on one person to focus on. Characters easily switch moods and teams in an instant and basically kill their entire character purpose within half an episode. These character motives are ill and weak and feature little noteworthy about them due to how inconsistent and bipolar they are, which only weakens the psychological intensity and risk the show tries to create. As a result of this lazy attempt at this psychological complexity, major plot reveals and turning points lose their luster and importance because the audience expected and saw these events coming from 13 goddamn light years away. Because at this point, the show has thrown so much convoluted and unexplained cheesy bullshit at you that it basically feels like these shocking plot points and events are just average and carry the story along instead of providing a new angle for the viewer to look at the show. It's like a boat of reeds cruising down a stream. These supposed plot twists in the anime don't really change the direction of the boat, they simply carry it down the same stream because it doesn't feel shocking or revolutionary to the viewer. Simply a continuation of the same mind-numbing plot you've been following. A plot twist is supposed to take that boat, fucking flip it 450,000 degrees into the air, and blast it at full speed ahead into a tsunami. It provides a change of scenery and pace because now there are new elements introduced that the viewer was previously unaware of and can make new generalizations or theories off of. But Promised Neverland just completely misses the mark there with its attempt to make its shows complex and dynamic while working within such a short time frame. I would have much rather vied for a much more consistent and streamlined show if it meant losing some of that show's non-existent psychological threat.
Another huge problem with the show are cliffhangers, which are basically pointless. They are presented extremely well, I will say, when characters are at their greatest psychological vulnerability, but then in the next episode, when they pick up, they say, "Fuck you, this cliffhanger wasn't actually even a cliffhanger because nothing bad even happened. You were worrying about nothing, you dumb fuck." A Lamau! They're presented in an interesting manner, however executed extremely poorly, as much like the double and triple agents scattered in the show, they soon become stale and unimportant to the overall escape of the children, because they don't provide any value to the show, and anytime they show up, the viewer doesn't really feel a sense of fear or excitement, because they know that at the end of the day, this cliffhanger is only going to lead to disappointment.
And finally, probably my least favorite thing about this show, characters. Emma's a really weird character, and Mr. Bakugo looking ass over here is no exception either. But let me first begin by talking Emma's character. Her personality is consistent, I'll give her that, but she is annoyingly persistent, and while you could argue that's a good thing, in this case her stubbornness is often looked upon as a weakness and really isn't fun to watch sometimes. In my opinion, if you want to make a good happy-go-lucky or the quirky archetype of a girl that Emma kind of embodies, she better be like her, and she better have a working pancreas at that, piece of shit. Until the end of the show where they pull some serious Deus Ex Machina bullshit in order to compensate for her carefree personality, her development is quite rapid and with very little explanation for it, and overall is very rushed, and personally I find it quite annoying and not too enjoyable to watch. But overall, compared to the other characters in the show, she's actually might be the best character. Yeah. Ray, on the other hand, yikes. His character was kind of strange. He was supposed to be the lone wolf who was always calm and collected, but in the anime, he was only like slightly edgy and was most of the time cooperable and always thinking in the best interest for the group as a whole. Seems like a pretty warm guy. But as it turns out, his character suffers from some serious bipolar disorder, especially towards the end when he turns into that edgy girl who always blasts Billie Eilish through the hallways while ripping a fat jewel cloud. His character personality was basically used for the first 4 episodes, and then after that, they just abandoned it for literally no reason, with no development at all. And this is the issue that most of the other characters face as well. They have no personality. They're written at the convenience to just fit and move the story along. Their characters change when their surroundings change. It doesn't feel like these characters are independent.
They simply only know how to follow and adapt, never how to lead. Literally, the only character with real character traits was probably Emma, and that's because she doesn't give a fuck, ever, regardless of what happens to her.
But enough mauling this show. Now I'll talk about some things that I actually liked about this show. I have to say, on a technical level, this show is mind-blowing. This is Cloverworks we're talking about, so I was expecting some pretty good animation. Now, admittedly, the art can look a bit weird at some times, but additionally, the soundtrack for this show slaps. I can't remember the last time I heard a soundtrack from an anime this comprehensive and moving. The opening, while a bit unsynchronized between the animation, is very catchy and iconic, while the ending is elegant and well-tempoed, delivering a sense of thrill and excitement that is a bit untypical in endings. And while all of the background, opening, and ending music are great, we get to the main course. It's a track called Isabella's Lullaby. You know Never Coming Back from Violet Evergarden? Well, this track is basically the equivalent of that. It's probably the most iconic track from the entire show through its well-executed use at critical and the few and far between truly emotional moments. Its built-up and release and soothing melody are rivaled by only a few select tracks and is by far my favorite piece of music in the show and maybe in all of anime. And finally, we get to Isabella. Despite this show being a train wreck for a large majority of the show, I think Isabella has to be one of the best villains in anime of all time, and that is not an exaggeration. We often tend to think of a good villain as one who has ideas and morals that overlap with our own and cause us to associate a bit with them. Isabella associates with the audience through her emotional and psychological dilemma that she has to face. Towards the very end of the show, we learn about Isabella's struggle and past, and while I'm not going to spoil too much about it, Isabella has to deal with a serious dilemma. She has cast her freedom away into the hands of the demons and has to watch and administer the death of her own kind to these beings who are vicious and ruthless. Yet a part of her still yearns to be free. Even though she cannot ever leave the farm, as her body is quite literally biologically bound to the farm, a part of her is still with her when she was a kid, her sense of freedom. When she learns about Emma, Ray, and Norman's plan to escape, she is confronted with a deep moral decision. Does she honor her allegiance to the demons and block their escape? Or perhaps does she turn a blind eye to their escape? It is a horrible and dreadful mentality which makes her such a good character. The audience, though despises her and has to view her as an enemy and roadblock, is empathetic of her situation and can't seem to find the right feelings to muster against her. We can't help but feel bad for her, a job where she has to send her own people to their deaths when she herself used to be one of these children who knew her fate and wanted to run away, just like Emma and the others. It is so simple of a motive, yet so powerful, that it brings the topics of ethics into consideration for it.
Now that's some goddamn 4D chess!
Overall, like I mentioned in my intro video, I think Promised Neverland gets a 2 out of 5 for its first season. It certainly had its great emotional and impactful moments with a very interesting plot, but storytelling wise, it is just a complete shit show. It has trouble deciding what it's trying to actually be, and these mixed signals just lead to more confusion and makes the show actually hell Satan trying to watch. As for the season 2, I understand in the manga they begin to cover a lot more about the actual lore and story, but what I'm looking for in season 2 is a better handling of the actual content and how it is presented. I don't want all the information to be as cluttered and as disastrous as it was in season 1. If we get a much more streamlined or much more comfortable and reasonable watching experience, I am definitely bumping this show's rating up, but obviously only time will tell. Now, if you'll excuse me please, I need to buy a set of 4D chess.